Two numbers drifting apart like continents, Shanghai and New York. And inside that gap, you can hear the metal market making a sound it hates making, a quiet, creaking shortage. Today is January 30th, 2026, and the fear you're seeing isn't mainly about charts. It's about custody, and it's about access. Because two separate stories just collided into one. Story 1, a licensing gate on silver exports that tightens every week. Story 2, a renewed push for 1,236 tons of gold to come home, fast. Put them together, and you get what I'm calling the bimetallic squeeze. Silver gets harder to source for industry, and gold gets harder to promise without proving you can deliver on time. Before we go further, this is education, not financial advice. We're going to follow the plumbing, where metal moves, where it stops, and what that tells you. What a silver strike really means. Let's start with silver, because silver is the metal that looks small, until it isn't. Since January 1st, 2026, exporters have been operating under a tighter licensing regime. In plain English, silver can still leave, but every shipment has to clear approvals. And approvals change the whole game, because they don't just filter volume, they filter speed, they filter priority. They decide which buyers get metal this month and which buyers get maybe next quarter. Imagine you run a factory. You don't care about the internet argument. You care about the day the line stops. You can't solder a promise. You can't wire a spreadsheet into a circuit. You need atoms, in hand, in spec, on schedule. Now here's the market translation. In the last 60 days, traders estimate roughly $3.7 billion worth of physical silver has been kept inside domestic channels instead of flowing outward. Let's convert that into something you can feel. If silver is around $115 per ounce, then $3.7 billion is roughly 32 million ounces. That's not a cute number. That's the difference between plenty of supply and tight enough to break timing. And timing is where the stress starts. Why silver matters more than people admit. Silver isn't just a precious metal story anymore. It's a throughput metal. Solar, power electronics, high-end solder and contacts, medical devices, and advanced hardware that depends on high conductivity components and reliable thermal pathways. Silver is the tiny bolt holding big systems together. You can swap brands of bolts. You can't swap the conductivity curve. So when the flow slows, buyers don't calmly negotiate. They hoard, they overorder, they build buffer inventory, because the nightmare isn't paying $10 more. The nightmare is missing a delivery window and losing a contract. This is how shortages begin, not with empty shelves, with longer lead times. First it's 2 weeks, then it's 6 weeks. Then it's, we can ship half now, half later. And then suddenly you're hearing the one sentence that turns markets cold. We can't quote you a date. Now watch what happens when the pipeline tightens. The price doesn't rise smoothly, it fractures. Paper trades everywhere. Physical trades where it can actually be delivered. That's why people are watching the premium gap, like it's a smoke alarm. Over the last week, a gap of around $17 per ounce has shown up between Shanghai pricing for physical metal and the benchmark futures-driven pricing in New York. A $17 gap isn't a little arbitrage, it's a message. Metal here is real and wanted now. Metal there is promised and wanted later. When that gap opens, it tells you something brutally simple. Someone is paying extra to avoid the risk of waiting. And once buyers start paying to avoid waiting, the market flips. Price becomes secondary. Allocation becomes the product. A lot of people hear premium and assume the market will instantly close it. So let's talk reality. To close a physical premium, you need metal you can buy, permission to export, shipping capacity, insurance, refining and assay where needed, and a clean chain of custody. Each step has a clock. Each clock can be delayed. And when you add approvals into the first step, the whole pipeline becomes lumpy, so the premium becomes sticky. It doesn't vanish in a day. It becomes a tax on urgency. And that tax is the signal the market is screaming right now. Now zoom in on the calendar. Silver ran hard into late January. We saw prices push to a historic high around $117.71 per ounce on January 27th, 2026. You can argue about the last decimal. What you can't argue about is this. When a market moves like that, it's not retail emotion alone. It's a bid for scarce supply. Fast moves often happen when paper adjusts instantly, but physical adjusts slowly. That mismatch creates a violent whip. Price leaps first, then the real-world constraints show up in premiums, spreads, and delivery terms. Now let's shift to gold, because gold is the confidence metal. Germany holds one of the largest national gold reserves on Earth. A significant portion, about 1,236 tons, is stored in New York. At recent pricing levels, that slice is valued around $247 billion. Here's why this matters, without turning it into a political argument. Gold stored abroad is a trust instrument. It's not just metal in a room, it's a relationship between a holder and a custodian. When a holder says, "We want it back," the market hears a deeper question. How fast can you deliver what you say you hold? Because if delivery is easy, the request is boring. If delivery is hard, the request becomes contagious. 1 ton of gold is 32,150.7 troy ounces. So 1,236 tons is about 39.7 million troy ounces. And bullion isn't shipped as loose glitter, it's shipped as bars. A standard London-style bar is roughly 400 troy ounces. So you're talking about on the order of 99,000 large bars. That is a lot of weight. That is a lot of paperwork. That is a lot of security logistics. Which is why gold repatriation is usually slow and scheduled over years. So when the conversation shifts toward faster, markets lean forward. Now I want you to see the mechanics, because this is where the panic comes from. If one major holder requests a large visible amount of gold back, other holders don't need to hate anyone to get nervous. They just need to imagine being second in line. That's how runs form in any custodial system, not from anger, from sequence. It's the elevator problem. If the elevator can only carry a few people at once, nobody panics, until they suspect the elevator might not come back in time. So the moment a big repatriation request hits the news cycle, the real stress test begins. Inventory, schedules, bar lists, assay, transport capacity, chain of custody documentation. Gold is heavy, gold is slow, and slow delivery is how confidence leaks. You've probably heard versions of the empty vault claim. Let's handle this carefully and logically. There are 3 separate possibilities, and markets react to all 3. 1. The gold is there, but logistics take time. 2. The gold is there, but it's tied up in leasing and must be recalled and reassembled. 3. The gold is there on paper, but the physical is fragmented across obligations, making immediate delivery difficult. Notice what I did not say. I did not say missing, I said immediately deliverable. In modern bullion systems, the difference between owned and deliverable today is everything, because confidence isn't a balance sheet word. Confidence is a time word. If silver becomes scarce, industry bids up physical supply. That can pressure short-dated contracts and inventory pools. It also pulls more metal out of the floating market into end users. At the same time, if gold holders start prioritizing custody and proximity, more gold leaves shared vault networks and becomes sticky again, sitting at home, not circulating. That's the bimetallic squeeze. Both metals become less willing to circulate. And when metals stop circulating, paper instruments get stress tested, not because paper is evil, but because paper assumes smooth settlement. Scarcity is not a moral event, it's a math event. So why does this make the West look like it's panicking? Let's say it cleanly, without blame. Because modern systems run on confidence plus throughput. Silver is throughput. If silver gets tight, high-tech and energy supply chains feel it first. Gold is confidence. If gold delivery becomes a public question, currency confidence feels it next. When throughput tightens and confidence gets audited at the same time, you get the one thing central planners hate: uncontrolled uncertainty. And uncertainty doesn't need a villain. Uncertainty just needs a deadline. If you want to follow this like a professional, track the clocks. Clock 1, approval time. How long does permission take? Clock 2, shipping time. How long does metal take to move? Clock 3, assay time. How long until it is verified and accepted? Clock 4, settlement time. How long until paper becomes delivery? When those clocks speed up, stress eases. When those clocks slow down, stress builds. And right now, multiple clocks are slowing at once. If you want to track this without getting hypnotized by one spot, quote, watch friction. Here's your checklist. Premium gaps, Shanghai versus Western benchmarks. If the gap widens, the physical bid is winning. Delivery chatter, back orders, longer lead times, rising minimum order sizes. Borrowing signals, lease and swap costs. When borrowing metal gets more expensive, supply is tight. ETF behavior, discounts, unusual flows, and changes in redemption patterns. Future structure, backwardation signals, urgency, steep contango signals, pay me to wait. Vault reporting, not just totals, how much is truly available for delivery versus parked. And most importantly, watch whether the story shifts from price to permission. Because permission is what export licensing controls, permission is what custody systems reveal, and permission is what makes markets panic quietly before they panic loudly. Here's a detail most people miss. A lot of industrial buyers hedge in paper. They lock a price in futures, then they assume they can source the metal later. That works in normal times. In tight times, the hedge can become a trap. Because your futures position can be profitable on paper, but your factory still needs a truck to arrive with the right metal. If the premium jumps or the delivery window slips, the hedge doesn't save the production line. It just tells you what the official price was, while the real-world price moved somewhere else. That's why premium gaps matter so much. They're the receipt that shows who controls the physical lane. When inventory is thick, sellers can absorb buying waves. When inventory is thin, sellers defend themselves by widening spreads, raising margins, and stepping back. That creates the air pocket feeling on a chart. Price moves fast because liquidity disappears. It's not always a conspiracy. Sometimes it's a safety reflex. Market makers don't want to be the last buyer in a falling elevator. So when you see sudden dumps and snapbacks, translate it like this. The market is trying to discover the level where real sellers exist. And if sellers are holding back because they prefer to keep metal for domestic use, the level has to rise. Most people picture a shortage as there is none left. Real shortages are usually bottlenecks. Bottleneck 1, export permission. Metal exists, but crossing borders slows. Bottleneck 2, refining and form. Metal exists, but not in the right purity or product for the buyer. Bottleneck 3, deliverable inventory. Metal exists, but it is sitting where it won't move without a premium. When all three bottlenecks tighten together, price can do something weird. It can be lower in paper and higher in physical at the same time. That's not a contradiction. That's two different markets telling two different truths. Now imagine Germany receives a meaningful tranche quickly and cleanly. What happens next is psychological, not political. It would signal that the custodial system is strong, confidence rises, and the story cools down. But if the process looks slow, complex, or defensive, the opposite happens. Other holders begin asking logistical questions of their own. Not because they want drama, because they want certainty. And the moment certainty becomes a scarce asset, gold stops being a trade and starts being insurance again. That is why the gold request matters even to people who never touch a bar. It's a public stress test of trust. Call 1 is a procurement desk asking, can you guarantee delivery and what's the premium? Call 2 is a vault asking, which bars, which cereals, which date, which route? When those calls get louder than the spot quote, you're no longer in a normal market, you're in a timing market. And timing markets are where squeezes are born, right now. So if you're wondering why headlines feel chaotic, here's the clean reframe. Silver is the industrial heartbeat and the pipeline is tightening. Gold is the trust anchor, and delivery speed is being questioned. When heartbeat and anchor wobble at the same time, paper claims don't instantly fail, but they start getting audited by reality. And reality audits with one question: can I get it on time? If you want a one-sentence summary, this isn't a story about ideology. It's a story about inventory, access, and time. Drop a comment with one word: price, if you think charts still rule, or delivery, if you think the next shock comes from the plumbing.